Hey guys, tonight we're going on a journey, a very slow, very gentle journey, to a place you probably never considered a verdant paradise, the Byzantine Empire. Imagine, if you will, the bustling, glittering metropolis of Constantinople, surrounded by arid landscapes. You can almost feel the dry air on your skin, perhaps a fine dust settling on your clothes as you wander the stone streets. Now, picture within that very same city, lush, blooming gardens, vibrant with color and scent, an absolute oasis in a world that wasn't exactly dripping with natural water features. It's a bit like finding a rainforest in the middle of a desert, only instead of actual rain. It's a testament to human ingenuity and an almost stubborn desire for beauty. You'd probably wilt faster than a hothouse flower in a dust storm if you tried to live there without their clever solutions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these sleepy stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to step back in time, all the way to the Byzantine Empire, specifically its capital, Constantinople, a city that, for centuries, was the undisputed jewel of the Eastern Roman world. When you think of ancient empires, you might conjure images of grand temples, imposing fortresses, or bustling marketplaces. But tonight, I want you to focus on something a little softer, a little more tranquil: the gardens. It seems almost counterintuitive, doesn't it? A vast, powerful empire, perched on the edge of Europe and Asia, much of its surrounding land not exactly lush, and yet, they cultivated incredible gardens. How did they manage to keep their gardens blooming in the desert, or at least, in a climate that certainly wasn't always cooperating? One of the mainstream historical facts that underpins this entire verdant endeavor is the sheer strategic importance of Constantinople itself. Situated on a peninsula, it was naturally defensible, but its very geography also posed challenges. The city relied heavily on sophisticated infrastructure to sustain its massive population, and that infrastructure extended to its green spaces. They weren't just decorative, they were a deliberate, often vital, part of the urban fabric. Now, for a quirky tidbit, did you know that some Byzantine texts describe gardens with mechanical singing birds and miniature waterfalls? These weren't just passive spaces, they were designed to be interactive, almost whimsical environments. Imagine strolling through a quiet garden, the air heavy with the scent of jasmine, and then suddenly, a mechanical bird begins to chirp a tune. It's a far cry from your average backyard gnome, isn't it? It speaks to a level of engineering and playful luxury that we often overlook when we think of ancient civilizations. It reminds you that even back then, people found joy in little luxuries, perhaps especially so. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these intricate mechanical garden features was widespread or limited to only the most elite imperial estates. Was it a common aspiration for the wealthy, or simply a rare display of extravagance by the emperors themselves? The surviving descriptions are tantalizingly brief, leaving much to our sleepy imaginations. But what is clear is that the Byzantines weren't just planting seeds, they were crafting experiences, miniature Nick worlds within their imposing city walls. And to do that, especially in a not-so-rainy region, they needed water. A lot of it. And that, my friends, is where the real ingenuity begins. To understand how the Byzantines managed to keep their gardens blooming, even when the local rainfall wasn't exactly showing up for work, you have to appreciate their absolutely mind-boggling mastery of water management. We're talking about an intricate network of aqueducts and massive underground cisterns that would make a modern city planner green with envy, or perhaps just very, very tired. Imagine, for a moment, that you are an engineer in 5th century Constantinople. Your task? To bring fresh water from miles away, across valleys and through hills, to a thirsty, ever-growing city. You're not just building a pipe, you're building a monumental feat of engineering, often involving arches soaring dozens of feet into the air. These aqueducts, remnants of which you can still see today, like the impressive Valens Aqueduct, were the city's lifeblood. They weren't just for drinking and bathing. A significant portion of this water was channeled directly to the imperial palaces, the public baths, which were, let's be honest, almost as important as breathing, and, crucially, to the private and public gardens. This isn't just a mainstream historical fact. It's the mainstream historical fact about Constantinople's survival. Without this continuous, abundant supply of water, the city simply couldn't have functioned, let alone supported verdant escapes. The Byzantines inherited much of this technology from the Romans, but they maintained and even expanded upon it, adapting it to their specific needs. They understood that water was power, and they used it to project that power through both sustenance and splendor. Now for a quirky tidbit, beyond the grand aqueducts, the Byzantines also had an incredibly sophisticated system of underground cisterns. We're not talking about your average rain barrel. Some of these were colossal, cathedral-like structures, like the Basilica Cistern, also known as the Sunken Palace, which could hold over 80,000 cubic meters of water. Imagine stepping into a vast, dimly lit cavern, supported by hundreds of ancient columns, with water gently lapping at your feet. It's almost eerily beautiful. And the quirky part? These cisterns were sometimes stocked with fish to keep the water clean and prevent algae growth. So, while you were admiring the imperial roses underneath your feet, fish were diligently working to keep the water flowing to those very roses. Talk about an integrated ecosystem. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these vast cisterns was purely for emergency water storage during sieges, or if they were also heavily relied upon for daily consumption and garden irrigation. It's likely a bit of both, but the sheer scale suggests a deep understanding of resource management, anticipating both the everyday needs and the dire emergencies. It really makes you appreciate just how much planning went into simply existing in a bustling ancient metropolis. So, next time you turn on a tap, spare a thought for the Byzantines and their fish-filled underground reservoirs, silently working to keep their gardens and their empire flourishing. With water secured, the stage was set for the grandest expressions of Byzantine horticultural ambition, the imperial gardens. These weren't just pretty patches of grass. They were sprawling, meticulously designed landscapes that served as powerful symbols of the emperor's wealth, taste, and dominion over nature itself. Imagine, if you will, the great palace of Constantinople, an architectural marvel in its own right, now surrounded by layers of verdant splendor, a deliberate counterpoint to the stone and marble. One mainstream historical fact about these imperial gardens is that they were often arranged in terraces, cascading down towards the sea or offering panoramic views of the city and the Bosphorus. This terrace design wasn't just for aesthetics. It also helped with irrigation, allowing water to flow gracefully from one level to the next, nourishing everything in its path. You can almost hear the gentle murmur of water features, strategically placed to enhance the peaceful atmosphere. These gardens were private retreats for the imperial family, spaces for quiet contemplation amidst the relentless demands of governing an empire. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some accounts describe paradise gardens within the imperial complex, specifically designed to evoke the biblical Garden of Eden. These weren't just gardens in the European sense. They incorporated elements from Persian and Middle Eastern gardening traditions, focusing on enclosed spaces, intricate water channels, and often featuring exotic birds and animals. Imagine strolling through a walled garden, the air thick with the scent of unfamiliar blossoms, while peacocks strut majestically by, or a gazelle peeks out from behind a stand of cypress trees. It's like a living, breathing diorama of earthly perfection, designed to remind the emperor, and anyone fortunate enough to visit, of divine favor and imperial power. It certainly beats a dusty old conference room for making a good impression. Historians still argue whether the primary influence on Byzantine imperial garden design was predominantly Roman classical tradition, or if it leaned more heavily into the emerging Persian and Islamic garden aesthetics. It's a fascinating debate because you can see elements of both. The formal geometry of Roman villas combined with the enclosed, paradise-like qualities found further east. Regardless of the exact stylistic lineage, these gardens were a fusion, a testament to Constantinople's position as a cultural crossroads. They weren't merely functional, they were statements, meticulously crafted environments where the emperor could stroll, meditate, and perhaps, just perhaps, forget the burdens of his crown for a fleeting moment, lulled by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant cries of an exotic bird. While the imperial gardens shimmered with power and opulence, another, perhaps more humble but equally significant, type of green space flourished within the Byzantine Empire, the monastic gardens. These weren't about grand displays or exotic imports. They were spaces of quiet contemplation, self-sufficiency, and deep spiritual connection. Imagine the hushed cloisters of a monastery, tucked away from the clamor of the city, and within its walls, a meticulously tended garden, an oasis not just of greenery, but of peace. One mainstream historical fact about monastic gardens is their intensely practical nature. Unlike their imperial counterparts, these gardens were primarily utilitarian. Monks and nuns cultivated herbs for medicinal purposes, vegetables and fruits for sustenance, and flowers for religious ceremonies. Every plant had a purpose, reflecting the monastic vows of poverty and self-reliance. You can almost see the monks, with sleeves rolled up, diligently tilling the soil, their movements slow and deliberate, a form of active meditation. It was a stark contrast to the grand aqueducts and terrace displays of the imperial palaces, yet no less vital. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some monastic gardens were designed with very specific allegorical layouts, representing theological concepts or biblical stories. For instance, a central well might symbolize the wellspring of life, or certain pathways might represent the journey of faith. It wasn't just about growing food. It was about creating a living sermon, a tangible representation of their spiritual beliefs. Imagine tending a garden not just for its produce, but for its profound symbolic meaning. Each weed pulled, each seed planted, a small act of devotion. It gives a whole new meaning to organic gardening, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the precise design of these symbolic gardens was widespread or largely confined to larger, more influential monasteries. Did every small monastic community meticulously craft allegorical pathways, or was it a more organic, less formalized approach to their green spaces? What is clear, however, is that these gardens provided not only physical sustenance, but also a vital spiritual sustenance, a calm, ordered world within the often chaotic realities of the outside empire. The gentle rhythm of tending to plants, the quiet communion with nature, offered a unique form of solace and focus, allowing the monks and nuns to fulfill their vows while literally cultivating their own quiet corner of the world. It's a powerful reminder that even in the most practical endeavors, there can be profound meaning and a deep connection to something larger than oneself. Beyond the grand imperial showpieces and the serene monastic havens, the Byzantine passion for greenery trickled down into the very fabric of urban life. Not every citizen had acres for a sprawling garden, but even in the crowded confines of Constantinople, people found ways to integrate plants into their daily routines. Imagine bustling marketplaces, narrow alleyways, and dense residential areas, and still, you'd encounter surprising splashes of green. One mainstream historical fact is that many Byzantine homes, even humble ones, featured small courtyards or atriums. These weren't just architectural features. They were often designed to incorporate a small garden space, even if it was just a few potted plants or a single, shade-providing tree. This central green spot provided a much-needed respite from the urban heat and noise, a private patch of nature within the confines of their dwelling. You can almost picture families gathering in these cool courtyards on a warm evening, the scent of herbs or a single blooming rose gently perfuming the air. Now for a quirky tidbit. Archaeological excavations in Byzantine urban areas have sometimes uncovered evidence of window box gardening, or what we might call vertical gardens. People would place terracotta pots on ledges, sills, or even hang them from balconies, cultivating edible herbs or small, fragrant flowers. It's a testament to how deeply ingrained the desire for greenery was, even when space was at an absolute premium. Imagine walking through a narrow Byzantine street and looking up to see colorful blooms cascading from an upper-story window, a small, defiant act of beauty against the gray stone. It's like a very, very old version of an urban balcony garden, isn't it? Though probably without the artisanal kale. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of these smaller, everyday green spaces was more about practicality, growing a few herbs for the kitchen or medicine, or if it was driven by a deeper aesthetic appreciation for nature, even in miniature. Was it a necessity, a way to supplement their diet, or was it simply that people instinctively sought out the calming presence of plants? It's likely both, a blend of the practical and the poetic. These small, private gardens, far from the imperial gaze, were perhaps the most authentic expression of the Byzantine people's enduring connection to the earth, proving that even in a bustling ancient metropolis, everyone could find a tiny corner of paradise to call their own. The Byzantines weren't content with just local flora. Their extensive trade networks and imperial ambitions meant their gardens became fascinating melting pots of exotic species from across the known world. Imagine the ships arriving in Constantinople's harbors, not just laden with spices and silks, but with carefully preserved seeds and delicate saplings destined for a new home. One mainstream historical fact is that Constantinople's strategic location, bridging east and west, made it a natural hub for the exchange of botanical knowledge and rare plants. The empire maintained diplomatic ties and trade routes that stretched from Spain to China, and botanical curiosities were often exchanged as valuable gifts between rulers. You can almost picture an imperial botanist carefully examining a new, unfamiliar plant, wondering if it could thrive in the Byzantine climate. These weren't just decorative. They were living proof of the empire's global reach, botanical trophies brought back from distant lands. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some historians suggest that the introduction of specific fruit trees, like certain varieties of citrus or peaches, played a significant role in diversifying the Byzantine diet and even influencing culinary trends. Imagine the excitement among the imperial chefs when a new, sweet fruit arrived, ripe for experimentation in their kitchens. It's a gentle reminder that even something as seemingly mundane as a new fruit could have a ripple effect, changing tastes and traditions across an empire. It's like the ancient equivalent of a new superfood hitting the market, only with far more intrigue and travel involved. Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for collecting these exotic plants was purely aesthetic, for the beauty and rarity of the specimens, or if there was a strong underlying scientific or economic interest in their potential uses, be it medicinal properties, dye production, or agricultural diversification. Was it simply about showing off, or was it about genuinely enriching their botanical knowledge and resources? It's likely a blend, as often happens in history. But the sheer variety of plants that found their way into Byzantine gardens, from fragrant roses originating in Persia to diverse spices from India, paints a picture of an empire deeply connected to the global exchange of goods and ideas, constantly seeking to integrate new wonders into its vibrant green spaces. While the exotic plants were fascinating, the vast majority of Byzantine garden space was dedicated to something far more fundamental: practical plants for food and medicine. These weren't just pretty faces. They were the backbone of household self-sufficiency and the empire's health. Imagine the daily rhythm of life, where your garden wasn't just a leisure activity, but a vital pantry and pharmacy. One mainstream historical fact is that Byzantine monasteries, as we touched on earlier, were particularly adept at cultivating extensive herb gardens. These weren't just for adding flavor to the meager monastic meals. They were crucial for preparing a wide range of remedies. From simple digestive aids to more complex concoctions for fevers or wounds, the knowledge of medicinal plants was highly valued and carefully documented in texts like the De Materia Medica by Dioscorides, which remained a foundational medical text for centuries. You can almost see the monks, hunched over parchment, meticulously noting down the properties of each plant, their hands stained with earth and herbal extracts. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some sources suggest that specific varieties of garlic and onions were not only dietary staples, but were also believed to ward off evil spirits and even protect against the plague. Imagine a Byzantine household hanging braids of garlic not just for cooking, but as a rudimentary, albeit pungent, form of spiritual and physical protection. It's a far cry from modern hand sanitizer, but it shows a fascinating blend of practicality, superstition, and traditional knowledge. You probably wouldn't survive a full day in Byzantium if you weren't okay with a little garlic breath. Historians still argue whether the knowledge of herbal medicine was widely disseminated among the general populace or largely confined to trained physicians and monastic practitioners. Was it common for every household to have a rudimentary understanding of healing herbs, or did people primarily rely on specialists? What is clear, however, is that these gardens provided an essential layer of food security and health resilience, allowing communities to sustain themselves and treat common ailments using nature's bounty. It's a powerful reminder of a time when the distance between your plate and your pharmacy was often just a few steps into your own garden. Beyond mere practicality, Byzantine gardens were also meticulously designed for sensory experience. They weren't just places to grow food or find medicine. They were immersive environments crafted to delight the eyes, soothe the ears, and fill the air with intoxicating scents. Imagine entering one of these spaces, not just seeing it, but truly feeling it, hearing it, smelling it. One mainstream historical fact is the pervasive use of fragrant plants like roses, jasmine, and various herbs. These weren't just planted for their beauty. Their scent was a deliberate part of the garden's allure, especially in courtyards and private imperial spaces. You can almost smell the heavy sweetness of a rose in full bloom, mingling with the sharper, cleaner scent of rosemary or thyme. This emphasis on fragrance would have transformed a simple stroll into an olfactory journey, a pleasant assault on your nasal passages that could transport you away from the everyday. Now for a quirky tidbit. The Byzantines were known to incorporate small, hidden water features designed to create specific sounds. Think less grand fountain, more subtle trickle or gentle splash, strategically placed to enhance the feeling of tranquility. Imagine a quiet corner of a garden where you can hear the soft, rhythmic drip of water into a stone basin, perhaps accompanied by the distant chirping of birds. It's like an ancient version of a sound machine, isn't it? A deliberate attempt to craft an auditory landscape that encouraged relaxation and contemplation. It certainly beats the incessant honking of modern traffic. Historians still argue whether the precise arrangement of these sensory elements was guided by a formalized system of garden design principles, or if it was more intuitive, based on accumulated practical knowledge and aesthetic preferences passed down through generations. Was there a Byzantine feng shui for gardens, or was it simply about creating spaces that felt good? What is undeniable, however, is that these gardens were designed to be experienced with all the senses, a holistic environment intended to provide respite, beauty, and a profound connection to the natural world. They understood that a garden's true value wasn't just in what it produced, but in how it made you feel. While Constantinople's urban gardens were feats of ingenuity, the Byzantines also extended their green thumb beyond the city walls, cultivating vast rural estates that served multiple purposes, from agricultural production to exclusive imperial hunting grounds. Imagine leaving the bustling city behind, perhaps through one of the monumental gates, and emerging into a sprawling landscape where nature was both harnessed and celebrated. One mainstream historical fact is that many wealthy Byzantine aristocrats and even the imperial family owned extensive villas and estates in the countryside surrounding Constantinople or in more fertile regions of the empire. These estates weren't just country homes. They were integrated agricultural enterprises, featuring vineyards, olive groves, orchards, and extensive fields for grain. You can almost see the organized rows of crops stretching towards the horizon, a testament to the empire's reliance on its agricultural backbone. These rural gardens, though less ornamental than their urban counterparts, were vital for feeding the empire. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some of these rural estates included elaborate hunting parks, sometimes stocked with deer, wild boar, and even more exotic animals for imperial hunts. These weren't just wild forests, they were managed landscapes, carefully tended to provide both sport and a sense of untamed wilderness. Imagine the emperor, perhaps on horseback, pursuing game through a meticulously maintained woodland, a thrilling blend of natural environment and imperial control. It gives a whole new meaning to deer in the headlights. Only in this case, the headlights are probably golden chariots. Historians still argue whether the management of these vast rural estates was highly centralized and efficient, or if it varied significantly depending on the local lord or imperial administrator. Was there a standardized approach to agricultural production and landscape management, or was it a more ad hoc system? What is clear, however, is that these sprawling properties played a critical role in the Byzantine economy and provided a different, perhaps rougher, kind of green space for the elite, offering both sustenance and sport. They serve as a reminder that the Byzantine relationship with nature extended far beyond the polished, perfumed gardens of the capital, embracing the wilder, more productive landscapes of their vast empire. Behind every flourishing Byzantine garden, whether imperial or humble, lay the dedicated hands of gardeners, often unsung heroes who possessed a deep, intuitive understanding of the earth. Imagine these individuals, toiling under the Mediterranean sun, their knowledge passed down through generations, shaping the very landscapes we're now exploring. One mainstream historical fact is that gardening, particularly in the larger estates, was a specialized skill, often involving a hierarchy of workers. There would be master gardeners overseeing the design and cultivation, and numerous laborers performing the daily tasks of planting, watering, and pruning. These individuals weren't just brute force. They held invaluable practical knowledge about soil conditions, plant needs, and seasonal rhythms. You can almost hear the soft rustle of their movements, the rhythmic sound of a spade turning earth, as they coaxed life from the seemingly unyielding ground. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some Byzantine agricultural treatises and medical texts occasionally offer fascinating insights into the specific tools used by these gardeners. Beyond the obvious spades and hoes, there are mentions of specialized pruning knives, grafting tools for fruit trees, and even rudimentary irrigation implements. Imagine a gardener carefully grafting a new variety of pear onto an existing tree, using techniques that would be recognizable to an arborist today. It suggests a level of sophistication in their horticultural practices that goes beyond mere subsistence farming. It's like finding a very old, very practical instruction manual for green-thumbed Byzantines. Historians still argue whether the theoretical knowledge of horticulture, as recorded in some Byzantine texts, was widely applied by the everyday gardeners, or if much of the practical skill was simply oral tradition passed down through apprenticeship. Was there a formal school of Byzantine gardening, or was it a more organic, hands-on learning process? What is clear, however, is that these individuals, with their simple tools and profound understanding of plants, were the essential engine behind the verdant splendor of the Byzantine world. They remind us that even the grandest designs ultimately rely on the steady, patient work of human hands, shaping the earth one careful movement at a time. Maintaining a garden, especially one in a challenging climate, is never just about planting seeds. It's a constant battle against the relentless forces of nature. The Byzantines faced their fair share of pests, diseases, and the unpredictable whims of weather, requiring vigilance and ingenuity to keep their green spaces thriving. Imagine the constant worry, the small daily struggles to protect your precious plants. One mainstream historical fact is that Byzantine agricultural texts often include advice on crop rotation and companion planting, early forms of pest management designed to reduce disease and insect infestations naturally. They understood that planting certain crops together could deter pests, or that rotating fields would replenish soil nutrients and prevent the buildup of specific pathogens. You can almost see a Byzantine farmer or gardener carefully considering which plants to put next to each other, a gentle, age-old wisdom guiding their hands. It's like a very, very old version of integrated pest management, long before the term was even invented. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some sources allude to magical remedies or superstitious practices employed to protect crops from blight or vermin. While practical methods were certainly dominant, there might have been instances of amulets hung in orchards or specific incantations whispered over fields, especially during times of particular hardship. Imagine a farmer, after a long day of practical work, perhaps quietly performing a small, traditional ritual to ensure the health of his grapevines. It's a fascinating blend of empirical knowledge and folk belief, a reminder that people often look for comfort and control in all available avenues. You probably wouldn't survive a full day without knowing a charm or two if your livelihood depended on it. Historians still argue whether the effectiveness of these more superstitious practices was genuinely believed, or if they were simply comforting rituals performed alongside proven agricultural techniques. Did people truly think a particular charm could ward off locusts, or was it more about psychological reassurance? What is clear, however, is that the Byzantines, like all agricultural societies, faced a perpetual struggle against environmental threats. Their gardens, whether grand or small, were not static works of art, but dynamic, vulnerable ecosystems requiring constant attention, a testament to the enduring challenge of working with nature, not against it. Beyond their practical and aesthetic purposes, Byzantine gardens often carried deep philosophical and religious significance, drawing heavily on ancient ideas of paradise and divine order. Imagine these green spaces not just as physical locations, but as living manifestations of profound beliefs, carefully crafted to resonate with spiritual truths. One mainstream historical fact is the strong influence of the biblical concept of the Garden of Eden on Byzantine garden design and symbolism. The idea of an unblemished, perfect garden where humanity lived in harmony with God was a powerful motif. Imperial gardens, in particular, often sought to evoke this Edenic ideal, aiming to create a miniature paradise on Earth that reflected divine favor and cosmic order. You can almost feel the deliberate intention behind every planting, every water feature, meant to transport the viewer to a state of grace and contemplation. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some scholarly interpretations suggest that the intricate geometric patterns found in certain Byzantine mosaics, particularly those depicting nature scenes, might have been conceptual blueprints or idealized representations of garden layouts. Imagine an artist painstakingly arranging tiny colored tiles to form a floral pattern, not just for beauty, but perhaps to visualize a perfect garden that could be, or had been, built. It's like their version of landscape architecture plans, only far more artistic and permanent. It gives a whole new meaning to tile garden, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the philosophical underpinnings of Byzantine gardens were explicitly understood by the general populace or primarily appreciated by the educated elite and clergy. Was the symbolic meaning of these gardens widely recognized, or was it a more subtle, subconscious influence on the collective psyche? What is clear, however, is that these green spaces were more than just collections of plants. They were expressions of a profound worldview, reflecting a desire for order, beauty, and a connection to the divine. They were spaces where the earthly realm could, for a moment, touch the heavenly, offering solace and inspiration to those who wandered through their fragrant paths. Despite their careful cultivation and profound symbolism, Byzantine gardens, by their very nature, were ephemeral creations. Unlike stone fortresses or enduring mosaics, living plants are temporary, and few physical remnants of these once splendid green spaces survive today. Imagine a bustling garden, vibrant with life, now just an archaeological imprint, a whisper of what once was. One mainstream historical fact that underscores this ephemerality is that many Byzantine gardens were built within the constantly evolving urban fabric of Constantinople. As the city grew, was rebuilt after fires or sieges, or simply shifted its administrative centers, gardens were often paved over, built upon, or repurposed. Unlike, say, the enduring Roman aqueducts we discussed earlier, gardens rarely leave behind robust archaeological traces, making their study reliant on textual descriptions, which are often tantalizingly vague. You can almost hear the faint echo of past footsteps on paths that are now buried beneath centuries of new construction. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some scholars believe that certain rare plant species found today in isolated parts of the Mediterranean, particularly in old monastic sites, might be direct descendants of plants cultivated in Byzantine times, surviving through continuous propagation. Imagine a hardy olive tree, gnarled and ancient, that could trace its lineage back to a sapling planted by a Byzantine monk over 1,000 years ago. It's like a living fossil, a botanical time capsule. It reminds you that sometimes nature finds a way to preserve history, even when human structures crumble. Historians still argue whether the lack of surviving physical evidence for Byzantine gardens is primarily due to their perishable nature, or if it also reflects a lesser priority in archaeological excavation compared to more durable structures like churches and palaces. Was it simply hard to preserve, or did we just not look hard enough for them until more recently? What is clear, however, is that while the physical gardens may have faded, their legacy lives on through the vivid descriptions in Byzantine literature and the subtle influences they left on subsequent garden traditions. They exist now largely in our imaginations, blooming eternally in the realm of historical inquiry, a verdant ghost of an empire. Though many Byzantine gardens are lost to time, their influence didn't simply vanish. It rippled outwards, shaping garden traditions in later cultures, particularly in the Islamic world, and even back into Western Europe. Imagine the seeds of their ideas, carried by trade and conquest, taking root in new soils and blossoming into new forms. One mainstream historical fact is the significant impact Byzantine garden concepts had on the development of Islamic gardens. As the Islamic empires expanded, they often absorbed and adapted existing cultural practices, and Byzantine horticulture was no exception. Elements like intricate water features, terrace designs, and the cultivation of specific fragrant plants found new life and further refinement in the gardens of Damascus, Baghdad, and eventually Al-Andalus. You can almost see the visual echoes, a shared language of greenery and water, connecting these seemingly disparate cultures. This cross-cultural exchange of ideas is a powerful testament to the enduring appeal of beautiful, well-ordered green spaces. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some architectural historians suggest that the enclosed courtyards and central fountains found in later European monastic cloisters and even some Renaissance villas might subtly reflect Byzantine precedents, passed down through various channels. Imagine the monastic garden at a Byzantine monastery, quiet and serene, inadvertently influencing the peaceful quadrangle of a future European university or a grand Italian palazzo. It's like a very, very slow game of botanical telephone, with ideas traveling across centuries and continents. Historians still argue whether this transmission of garden knowledge was a direct, conscious borrowing, or if it was a more organic process of cultural diffusion, with ideas being subtly adapted and reinterpreted over time. Was it a deliberate act of copying or a more gradual evolution? What is clear, however, is that the Byzantine legacy, particularly in their innovative water management and aesthetic principles, contributed significantly to the rich tapestry of global garden history. Their dedication to cultivating beauty and order in the natural world left an indelible mark, reminding us that even in their disappearance, these gardens continue to inspire and inform our understanding of human interaction with nature. So, as our journey through the green heart of Byzantium draws to a close, let's take a final, lingering moment to truly imagine these spaces, to let them bloom in your mind's eye. Close your eyes, if you feel comfortable, and let the gentle narrative paint the scene. Imagine standing on a terraced garden overlooking the Bosphorus, the sea air cool on your face, carrying the faint, sweet scent of citrus blossoms from a nearby orchard. You hear the soft murmur of water trickling down an ornamental channel, perhaps a distant, stylized birdsong from a clever mechanical device. The sun warms the stone pathways, and the vibrant hues of Byzantine mosaics on a nearby wall reflect the soft glow of dusk. You see a carefully pruned cypress tree, its dark silhouette rising against a sky tinged with purples and oranges. You wander into a quieter, more enclosed courtyard, where the air is thick with the soothing aroma of lavender and rosemary. Here, the only sound is the gentle rustle of leaves in a light breeze, and perhaps the distant, muffled sounds of Constantinople, a world away. You might notice a small, practical plot of herbs, their leaves dusted with the evening's dew, ready for tomorrow's meal or a healing poultice. Remember that sophisticated aqueduct system, quietly humming beneath the city, feeding this very patch of green. Remember the imperial gardeners, perhaps now long retired, whose patient hands nurtured these living masterpieces. You might even spot a tiny, glimmering fish in a nearby cistern, diligently keeping the water clean for the thirsty roots above. The image is not one of frantic activity or grand drama, but of quiet persistence, of human ingenuity finding beauty and solace even in a challenging environment. These were gardens born of necessity, yes, but also of profound desire. A desire for beauty, for order, for a connection to the serene, even in the heart of a powerful empire. They remind us that for centuries, the Byzantines understood something fundamental about human well-being, that a touch of green, a whisper of nature, is essential for the soul. They carved out these oases, not just to survive, but to truly live and to dream. The sounds of the Byzantine garden begin to fade now, becoming softer, more indistinct. The scents of the blossoms mingle and soften into a single, calming aroma. The cool air becomes a gentle, reassuring breath. You are drifting, not through the bustling streets of ancient Constantinople, but through the tranquil, timeless spaces of memory and imagination. The green leaves blur, the water sounds become a quiet hum, and the soft darkness settles around you like a comforting blanket. Let the images dissolve, leaving only a sense of peace and a gentle awareness of history's quiet beauty.